I'm very, very glad to introduce our very, very well colleague and very well friend, Hans-Peter Haferkamp from the University of Cologne. The lecture from today would be about how to write a monograph. It's not general rules. Hans-Peter have said very, very exactly. They are very, very individual rules how to write a monograph. One cannot say Hans-Peter have wrote a lot of monographs. I know only 3 of them. The first one was the dissertation for the promotion of doctoral degree about the misuse of rights. It's quite large, but not very large book. The second one was the habilitation book about a leading person of historical school of law, Georg Friedrich Puchta. And the third one is about the school, historical school of law. It was very important school in the history of German legal scholarship, but not only the German. The historical school had very strong impact also in other countries in Europe and in America, both in North and in South, and also in Russia. So it was the school very crucial for the modernization of private law in the 19th century. And I think all 3 books from Hans-Peter Haferkamp are very well written. And it's the reason why we choose this topic. I would also like to know, how do you write your books, Hans-Peter? And I think it's enough if you want to say something more about yourself, and you can add. My very short introduction will be very short. I'm sorry. Please, the floor is
Thank you very much, Mayu. So you made the decisive point. Why am I allowed to tell you something about writing monographs? I only wrote 3. So let me say one thing. I made the typical way of a German professor. The German professor writes 2 books. It's PhD and his habilitation. Then he starts writing papers. I wrote lots of papers to lots of topics. And then I decided I like writing books. I prefer writing books. So I started again to write books. So I'm here as a colleague. I'm not a teacher who did something in the past or who reads your books, the PhD books, and has to be a critical mind or something like this. I have the same problems than you have. So I will not only tell you some of my personal rules I gave to myself, I will also show you my new book, which even Mario does not know, which is almost ready now. And I will show you the problems I had with this book. And I'll show you only 5 minutes. It's not ready yet, but I will show you something about my working with these books. So these rules are, which is important to me, they are personal, which means I think some of the rules can be generalized. Some of the rules depend on the way you work, and the way you work should be correlated to the way you think, the way you are as a scientist. And these ways are different. So some of these rules, I think, are very personal, so don't generalize them. Let me start with my presentation. 17 rules, okay? I start with the first one, which we did already talk about. So this will be something I can just remind you. I am convinced that the main or the most important thing for a monograph is that it has a question. And this seems to be very simple and nothing to talk about. But in reality, I'm convinced that 60–70% of the books I read, especially of the PhD, the dissertations I read, they have no question. So I will show you a bit later with my book what this means to me. Important is the title is not the question. The book should have a title which gives the reader the idea what it is all about. But the title usually is not that precise and does not have to be that precise as the question has to be. The question has to be very precise. The question is the sentence. I think that should start with why or when or who. And then the question should be that precise that the following questions you work with are quite the logic result of this main question at the beginning. I will try to show you what this meant to me. A typical question which PhD students have, or problem they have, which I do not think is a problem, is that you start with another question that you end with. In the beginning, it is usually so you have a topic. And for the PhD students, it's the problem that sometimes, I do not like this, but sometimes I give them the topic. So they think they have to do something I want, which is never true. I think it's the normal way that you start with the question and you change this question all over working. So you find out that some things do not work. You don't have the sources for it. The question is very often too wide, too open, not precise enough. Sometimes you find sources and you say, oh no, let's change the question. I found some sources, some other books, which are very interesting and nobody wrote to this. So let's change the question a bit. Let's go in a different way. I think this is no problem at all. And one should stay absolutely calm if this happens. For example, if someone wrote, I had this with my PhD, someone wrote the same topic than I did. I was working on it and there came up a book with the same topic. In the beginning, I was shocked. Then I read this book and I said, not so good. But then I decided, okay, but I should change the topic a bit. I should change the question a bit. With all my sources and all the knowledge I gained now, I should change it a bit to be something different than he does. So I think this is absolutely no problem. The only important thing is that the question you have in the end and the thing you answer are the same. I am somebody who can only think when he writes. I don't know how you are. I have lots of colleagues and lots of PhD students who read and read and read and read and read. And then they say, okay, after a year of reading, I will write down the book. I'm convinced this will never work. You read much too much. You have all these papers with writing down something, all these copies, all these ideas in mind. I'm convinced whatever I work about, if I work about a topic which I have no idea of, I start writing with it. If it's a paper and I have an absolutely new topic, I start writing the paper after 2 days. So I take a very short time to read about the topic. And whenever I read other books, I write already. So that means writing is to me an ongoing, ever-changing process. Usually I write in a book, in all parts of the book, in the same time almost. I have 20 chapters and then I write in the 16th chapter, then in the 20s, then again in the second. So there is I think it's of no use to write a book from the beginning to the end. At least I can't do this. So I rewrite the book all the time. And I write all over all the parts in the books. I'm always writing in. So it's only coherent at the end. At the last day, it must be coherent. And meanwhile, there are lots of topics which do not fit to each other. This part is does not work. It's not coherent to the part before and to the part afterwards. So this is no problem to me. It's like writing and thinking all together all the time. My personal rule: never drop names. I'm fond of these old ideas. We are all little dwarfs standing on the shoulders of other dwarfs. So we are not bigger than the others were. So I think science is modesty. So if I want to quote Jeremy Bentham or H.L.A. Hart or Hugo Grotius, I always have to me the question: if I would explain this to someone, and this someone would be Hugo Grotius, and I would tell him that I quote him now, would I do it if he's in the room? So I have the impression that more and more, it's more and more coming, at least in Germany. Most of the students, the PhDs, they start with a quotation of a very famous man, yeah? Thomas Hobbes. I think this is ridiculous. It's not ridiculous if you really know what he wrote. So if you want to quote something, take your time. Read him, understand him. So if I want to say something about Hans Kelsen, it will take me 2 weeks. Otherwise, I won't quote him. And if I don't have the time, I won't need him. Then I will say what I want to say by my own words. I don't need Hans Kelsen for it. It does not help me anything. I thought, perhaps my personal topic, I thought a lot about working with theories. I love theories. I work about theoretists. I work about theoretical thinkers, let's say it in this way. I love reading Kant. And I read Kant a lot. I read Schelling and I read Hegel. I love them. But do I work with them? Do I use them as a theory to guide my thinking? The chance is I get a totally different perspective on the topic. So if you have a topic about law and you use the system theory by Niklas Luhmann, you have a very specific view on law. And this can be very interesting. So it's a good chance. But I also see the dangers. If you share my opinion, you say science is modesty. If you want to work with Niklas Luhmann, take your time. So to understand Niklas Luhmann's theory, 6 months of working should be perhaps the time you need. Then you know him. But then you will see, we had the problem with the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt. They worked with Luhmann for quite a while. And if you work, let's make it more popular, on Foucault, as so many quote Foucault at the moment, everyone knows what Foucault writes and nobody reads him. So if you use Foucault for all your arguments, and you would take it scientifically, not popular, then you will find out there is no Foucault. There are only Foucault interpretations. So if you read Foucault, you make a Foucault interpretation. And this Foucault interpretation will be part of other interpretation. So you come to a discourse about Foucault. In Frankfurt, they had the problem that in the beginning, they started to read Luhmann. Then they started to read the science about Luhmann, and then became part of the science about Luhmann. And if you're part of the science about Luhmann, you will do nothing else than Luhmann. You're a Luhmann scientist. As we had the Hegelians in Germany, the left Hegelians and the right Hegelians in the 19th century. They discussed all the time about Hegel, and there was no time anymore to use him. This is a general problem I see. But on the other hand, if you don't do this and you simply say, okay, I use Luhmann, that means system theory. There are several systems, society, politics, law, and they have a code. And that means law has the code, law, just, unjust. It's ridiculous. If you find somebody who knows something about Luhmann, he will laugh about you. He say, no, you have no idea about Luhmann. It's much too simple. Don't do it like this. So do it scientifically or leave it behind, I would say, if you want to work with Luhmann. I will give you perhaps another possibility. If you think about theories, they must be open to falsification. So it's very important to have no theory which gives you the results, because then you don't need to do anything more than using the theory. Let me make this clear by one very simple, very general thing. In Germany, we had, for sometimes we worked on the topic, what does law, what does a norm or a paragraph, a section, affect in legal practice? How does steering of society with law work? If you use a theory for it, it's very dangerous. For this question, if you use Marx, for example, very simple, then Marx will say, law is part of the superstructure and the reality works on the basis. So his theory has already an answer to my question, because he will say norms are never able to steer a society. So if I have this question and I use Marx, I can stop working, because I say, okay, if Marx is correct, my question is answered. The theory answers my question. Very dangerous, wrong theory. I should never use a theory for such a question. It's a problem. So my answer to all this is, read theories, think about theories, but never follows theories simply. Don't use a theory of someone, because every theory is combined to a certain content. Hegel had a special society in mind when he made his encyclopedia. So you can very easily say, okay, let's learn from all these theories, and then I make myself one. I make a theory for my topic. This does not have to be too complicated. It can be very simple. It must not be a huge theory of society. It can be a middle-based theory. But a theory which must not be much more than a hypothesis, that's like this, can be very useful if you make it precisely to your content, to your topic. And don't be afraid to mix theories, to mix a bit of Foucault, as you understand, and a bit of Kant, a bit of whatever, Derrida, yeah. But don't say it's Derrida, it's Foucault, whatever, make it your own theory. I think I would encourage everyone to try this. Now I will show you my book in a second. I think the structure is the most important part of a monograph. I work 20% of all my working time on the structure of the book, which is absolutely true, believe me. I think for hours and hours on the structure. And the most important thing is that the structure is the result of the question. It has to fit perfectly. And I use the word program, the word to do. This is very simple. Let me just show it to you with this book, and you may all do the same. I don't know how you work. Let me just show you how I work with a book. This is the book I just finished. It's a book about the German Civil Code. And the book has the aim to show whoever is interested the basic ideas behind this code: philosophy, theory, history. So I want to show what this code was all about, what they did want to do, and I want to show how it developed in the 20th century. So what happened when we got this code and what happened in the 20th century. So first, technical question: how do I work? After I wrote 2 chapters, I will already use this program to make a structure by this word problem. That means that I use this, you see, oh, it doesn't work here. You know this problem. Give my, all these, the headings, take all the headings I have in my paper and make a structure out of it. So that means if I want to move in my book, I do it like this. I go on this and I'm in, okay? You will all do the same. So this is how I usually move. These are 350 pages now. So if I want to go somewhere, this is the way I move. This is easy. What is also important for me is this movement you see down here, the structure mode. I don't know what word calls it. We call it Gliederungsmodus in German. So it means all the headings are in this mode here. And this gives me the chance to make the different rankings of the headings to separate them. What does it mean? If I have the first ranking of the headings, I only have these headings, 4. This is the main heading of my book, okay? So this gives the main topic. That means after an introduction, I have two questions in this book. The first question is, this civil code is a private law codification. If this civil code is a private law codification, 2 questions arise. First, what is private law? Second, what is a codification? And if I ask this, then the following questions arise, I will show you. The second part of the book is, okay, how this, after I found out what this book is all about, what it wants to do and how they did it and how they developed it and what ideas were behind, then I will ask, okay, what happened with these ideas in the 20th century? And then at the end, I have a kind of resume. Okay, then I go in the second, and the book gets bigger, gets larger. Okay, so this is my first question. Is the Bürgerliche Gesetzbuch a private law codification? That means private law and then codification, simply, okay? Then I say, okay, what happened in the 20th century with this codification? This is not a question. What happened in the 20th century can mean everything. It's not a precise question. So I had a chapter which gives me 3 questions which follow the results of the first parts of the book. So the result of the first part of the book will be the German Civil Code has some fundamental ideas. It has to be logic and systematically. This is a scientific topic. It says something about the work and about what the judge is supposed to do with such a codification. It has an answer to that question. And the third is, it is a political codification. It has a political aim. So I have these 3 questions. What happened to the aims of the science? What happened to the position of the judge? What happened to the political concept of the civil code? So if I go down in the second part and I say, okay, how do I make this historical approach? I thought about a year and I changed this book 5 times. Always between, do I use an historical approach or a systematical approach? Do I say Weimar Republic, National Socialism, German Democratic GDR, or do I use the concept, system, judge, whatever? Okay, then I go to the third, and you see the book gets bigger, gets more and more. And now I decide, okay, if I might let only this. Then I have to decide, for example, if this is the political question. What is the political concept of the Bürgerliche Gesetzbuch? And I say it's a concept from free to social. And then I have to prove this. I have 3 sub-chapters which try to tell something about its codification in times of change. The private law thinking changes from free to social. And these 3 chapters are the critique of the BGB. They criticize it as being unsocial in 1889 already, when it was when it was already only drafted. They had an answer, codification and special law. And then I give always examples. I call them Vertiefung. There's this very concrete dogmatic abuse of rights in this context as an example of the change of this legal thinking. So I stop it now. So I go then on like this, and you see it gets bigger and bigger. So you may say this is naive and very simple, and you do this, everyone does it, it's very easy. Yeah. But this is the way how I work. This is the way how I develop a book. I always have a problem with the headings. Modesty and headings are a problem, because headings can be a bit more literal, a bit more intelligent, or they can be very precise but a bit boring. So I think the headings are very, very, very important, because the headings are the thing you use to find your way through the book. If you use the search machine technique word by word, and you will all work with this, it does, at least me, it does never help. If I use Google Books and I have 1,000 results with all my word in it, I know that sometimes to understand one result, it can take me an hour. I have to find, what was it for a book? What's the context? What is this book all about? So what's the chapter in the book he writes it? It's very complicated. So I'm still perhaps old style, but I use the structure to understand the book. It's very important, I think. So the structure has to help the reader to find what he wants to find. And this is also very simple. Everyone will accept that. But in reality, it's very often not the case. So if you want to say something about I don't want to bore you with German examples. Perhaps let's talk about H.L.A. Hart. Yeah, okay, you know the name. And so H.L.A. Hart, you want to write something about H.L.A. Hart, and you know he comes up and he has a very famous debate with Leon Fuller in Harvard when he's a very young man in 1958. And you want to write something about this. I know many books that would say new ways in Harvard. So there was a Fuller way, natural law, and now H.L.A. Hart comes and say, no, I criticize you from a positivist view. I think it would be a very intelligent and interesting heading, but very bad for a book. So I would write H.L.A. Hart's criticism of Leon Fuller's natural law. This is boring, but true. If I have this heading, I know what to find. This was something when I wrote my habilitation project, which was in huge letters on top of my working place. Wolfgang Kunkel, he's a very famous Romanist in Germany. He said, the bin is the question is the first, the second essential tool to every scientist. So especially for legal historians, it's a huge problem. You find a quotation and you love it. I have quotations which I will never forget. I can tell you after years, I love this quotation, but perhaps I should not write it down in my book. And I know many books which are totally overloaded with ideas and quotations and findings and sources, and they totally lose the line, they lose the question because they love all these little findings. Throw them away. And if you do not want to throw them away, say, which I always tell my PhD students, oh, that's a good topic, but another topic. Make a paper out of it. Make a spin-off. Also something very simple, which is not very often done, I have the impression. If you want to start a topic, read the whole secondary literature about this topic. And I would say, if you have such a topic worldwide, take your time to read all the secondary literature. And in Germany, there is now a debate. How can you prove that you read all this secondary literature? You know all these books. And there is a common habit, especially in Munich, colleagues in Munich, I had hours and hours of discussions about this. They always say the first footnote should prove that you know all the books. And now you have these huge footnotes with hundreds of books. I think this is of no importance at all. I think the book proves that you wrote all the secondary literature, that you read it. And this is something to do with, something I will tell you at the end. Whom do you write a scientific book for? And my answer is, you write this book for the absolute specialist. The one who knows the best about this topic. This is your reader. And you must expect him to know the secondary literature as you do know it. And you will have this impression yourself. If you are a specialist in something and you read another paper, you will find that, especially I myself do it always like this. I'm always very interested in the first footnotes, because the one who he quotes or she quotes in these footnotes tell me if he's in the topic or not. And this is not a sum of books. It can be one book. And you self-read your book, and you know, he wrote the book, he read the book also. And you know, yes, this book is the right book for this place. He's in, he knows it. He's a specialist. So everyone who knows something about the topic will know after 5 or 10 pages whether you are a specialist or not. And I think it's not important to make these huge footnotes with quoting all these. If you read all the books and you say most of them are not interesting, you do not have to quote them, but you have to have read them. I'm convinced that a specialist will find out that you haven't read the decisive book, whether you quote it or not. And this was the Munich discussion we also had. I always said, okay, you quote all these books, but have you read them? If you quote them, this does not help me anything. This only helps me that you found it somewhere, the title. But if I want to know whether you read the book, I read your book. I read your book, and you will see. I know the topic, and I will find out that you haven't read enough. In Germany, at least, PhD students can talk a lot about any programs about the footnote system. Citavi is very prominent in Germany. And how you make your, how you format your text is a huge topic. I do not spend a second on these topics. I do not care about the literature at the end. I do not care about the formatting of the footnotes. I do not use any help in footnotes, any program. I think it's all wasted time. I think a book is published in the end. And before you publish it, you start formatting. And this formattation process is very intensively, has very intensively something to do with what the publisher wants you to do. So I never think about formatting before that. Not so important, the question. I never write a bibliography parallel. So I have a book, I quote it, and then I have a second program, no, a second paper, and in this paper, I always take all the books I just quoted to make my literature at the end already while I write the book. The danger, is also rule of my personal rule, I change the book all the time. And I love the garbage bin as a tool. That means that there's a huge risk that at the end I have, in my literature, at the end, I have a book which I did not quote in the book before, because I throw them away when I change my book all the time. So also this is something I do at the very end. And if my students always say, oh, that makes so much work, my impression is after a book of 350 pages, I need 2 days to finish all this stuff, not more. It's not important simply. What can only be underestimated is the language. In my field, I have 2 professors, which I will not tell you the name now, but Mario, for example, and Tesi will know who I mean. They are both brilliant. One of them writes brilliant. You simply like to read him. In my field, he's worldwide the most accepted specialist in my field. He's very, very prominent. He was very, very prominent. And there's another one, which I would say, I think he's perhaps a bit more intelligent. And he's brilliant. But if you want to read him, you sometimes you need an hour to understand this one page. If I give his texts to my students, they are shocked. They do not like to read him. He writes too complicated. So I think work on your language. You know this famous story that Stendhal, which as far as I know, which is not true, but it's a good story. Stendhal read the Code Civil before he started writing his books. I don't know how you're, I'm a quite, I love music. So I learn languages because I'm a musical feeling person. So I learn the tone of the things. That means it's very important for me whom I read before. So this very complicated colleague, if I read him, I will make at least a 2 hours break before I write myself, because then I will transport his language in my book, which would not be right. So find your own language, but always say, I'm convinced, even if I write for the absolute specialist, it still is very good if I write very simple. This morning I read something by Niklas Luhmann, and he writes so simple. It's absolutely convincing how simple he can write. He did not always write like this. But in this paper from 1974, he writes very clear and very simple, because he writes to jurists, and jurists have no idea of theories. They don't understand him. So he writes very simple. Or Hans-Georg Gadamer, there are persons which write in very easy language. And I think it's a great ability if you're able to say complicated things in very simple and clear language. Short sentences, precise descriptions, you know all this. I'm an ironic person, so this is a rule for me. I love to make little ironic sentences. And I always hope I always think that the reader will read the subtext I mean with this. It's a little political thing I wanted to say there. But I'm convinced there's a rule from the commercial industries. They say, Ironie geht nie. Irony never works. So it's also a rule for me. Perhaps you don't have another, you have another rule, or you're in another context. Perhaps, I don't know. Perhaps I know that Mario, for example, and perhaps many in your country are very ironic. And perhaps your scientific literature is also very ironic. Then it's another world. In Germany, we are not so ironic. So I do not use irony in books. also very simple. If in Germany there's a habilitation project, the authors tend to write books with 1,000 pages. My first impression on such a book is it's not good. He will have written down everything which was in a way near to his topic. The great books in history, one of the thickest book is Theorie der reinen Vernunft by Kant. 600 pages, okay. But in these pages, you can change the world. The best PhD in Germany I know has 80 pages. It's brilliant. Every page is simply brilliant. So I think that's what I tell my PhD students, and which I could not, my last book did not make it. 350 pages, it's too big. So I lost my own game. But in 250 pages, you can change the world. And the advantage is if you are not too big, if you are short, you have to force yourself to concentrate yourself. You have to force yourself really to say what you want to say and not to say something left and right aside. Last topic. Most of my PhD students start the book with an introduction. And this introduction is nothing else than the writing down of the way they found their topic. So all they learned about their topic, they use as an introduction, 100 pages. And if you ask them why they do this, then they say, someone who's not a specialist has to understand the topic. So I have to make a huge introduction. And my answer is, who will read you? I'm convinced 80%, 90% of the PhDs in Germany have only two readers. The first examiner and the second examiner. And in reality, the second examiner sometimes does not read the book. He trusts in the first examiner and he makes a check. This is reality. The rest in the world will, if it's a good PhD, work with your book. He will never read it. I never read books. I work with books. So I read one chapter. I read one part of the book. I read the beginning just to have his question, to understand what he wants to talk. And then I read 1-2 chapters, never more. I do not read books. And most scientists do not read books. So this is important for you. And if you write for a specialist, you don't need this huge introduction, leave it away. A clear question and then a precise working on the schedule you have. Very precise headings. So that I can find when I have the books, and I don't know, in my last book from 2018, I quoted 1,300 books or something. You can't read them. I worked with them. So if I have a book and I do not have time, which is typical for a German professor, as you will all not have time, I want this book to tell me what it's about, and I want to find out where I find it. And this does not have to take time. If it's too complicated, I leave it away. Thick books in Germany are not quoted. Most of them, they do not have a precise structure. They do have too many topics. They are not quoted. So I think be aware of your audience. Now, for the first time, I wrote a book for a broader audience. This book about the Bürgerliche Gesetzbuch is for students, for colleagues, for PhD students, for habilitants, for assistants, for whoever is interested. This was very hard for me because I changed my language and I made more an introductory style. I try to explain it very simple to take many with me in this book. It was a book for students for the first time. It was very hard for me to change my language. And I'm not at all sure whether this worked. But usually if you make a scientific book, you write it for 5 persons in the world. And they have to be interested. They have to find what they search for. And they have to know after a few pages, you're the specialist. You are one of the colleagues they want to talk to. This is important. That's it. Thank you that you listened to me.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. It was fascinating. We have an audience from not only from Estonians, but from the persons from several nationalities, and they are not all the lawyers or jurists. They are from different disciplines also. I think it would be a good idea if someone have a question to introduce very shortly also the background. Where are you coming from? So I give the possibility for the discussion. I'm sure we have a lot of questions. Everyone who want to say something can only switch on or raise hand. Hannes, you have, I see your hand. And
I did raise my hand, yes. Hi. I'm a lawyer and I'm writing PhD on legal history. So it's maybe even more about history than about law, what I'm writing and working on. Well, first, thanks very much. That was very interesting. And I must say that with my very limited experience, I would undersign everything you have said, or almost everything. I thought I would like to make a comment about the biography and the references. I discovered Zotero, which is the referencing system. And this is really, really handy. And I would recommend it to everybody. It works with secondary literature when you have, well, provided you have inserted the literature in your database, but it's very easy to copy the notes nowadays from the databases. And I insert the author and page, basically, and references in the text. It doesn't work with archive materials and other materials, but with literature, it works perfectly well. And I don't need to bother about the formatting later or compiling bibliography. So that's why it's here. I would say that this is something that could be used without much of labor, and it makes your life easier. And it doesn't really distort you in your writing process. It just happens automatically, and it really functions. It works with Word and both on Mac and PC. So that was a comment, not a question.
Perhaps let me just make clear why I think this may be a perfect program. In Berlin, I worked with a colleague. He was a specialist in all these programs. And I saw that thinking about these programs, working in these programs, finding the right program, changing the program perhaps, because you have a better program and somebody else tells you this is even better, you change your program. It took him much more time than I would say, at least for me, the 5 days at the end. It's usually not more. So congratulations if you have a perfect program. It's only, I tell my young PhD leaders, don't waste too much time thinking about this. If you have something, it works, it's perfect, I would say.
Thank you. Hesi,
yes, I had a question. If we are all writing something. Now, I apologize. I am associate professor on Roman law at law faculty, and I have written already my thesis, so introducing also. But we have all written something or something more. But what have been for you the most difficult thing writing a monograph?
Actually, I must say, I love writing monographs. So I do not think there's something too difficult. But what I love is, what is to me the difference? I don't know. I can't. What is kauen in English?
Kauen.
Einen Knochen kauen.
Maybe chewing.
Chewing, yeah, chewing is okay. I had a talk with Michael Stollers about him, and he was also somebody who always said there are two kinds of persons: the book writers and the paper writers. He was a book writer, sure. And then I said, yeah, Michael, I'm also a book writer now. I changed my life and I want to become a book writer now. And he said, yeah. And whenever he met me, he said, which kind of bone are you chewing at the moment? And this is it. I love writing books because it occupies your mind for a very long time. You have so many problems which are all combined with each other. And it's such a huge thing. And you want to make it so perfect, the book. Paper, I simply write sometimes. You don't have time. You need this paper. There's this conference. Come on, let's do it. If you write a book, you say, I will only write several books in my life. So this is a much more intensive kind of thinking. And this is, so I would say it's more complicated. It's more, differentiated, and it's a bigger question. But it occupies you for a very long time, and this is what I love. So I would not say there is a topic you can't solve. I would say it's a good thing for a year or for 2 years to think about something. For my last book, 2018, I thought about 10 years, and it was a beautiful time. I would say every day. I still did not have to solve this problem. Then I found new sources. Oh my God, they don't fit to my hypothesis. I have to change my question. Oh my God. So this was an ongoing thing which I love.
Merike.
I would like to ask about your personal experience when you now think back about writing your PhD thesis and then habilitation book. So what did you learn from the first experience, and which book in your mind is better written?
I must laugh because this is a very crucial question. The 17 very personal rules I gave you are the result of my first book. I made all the mistakes you can make. I was young and idealistic. And I thought I've just had finished my exams. I said, I'm very intelligent. Come on, let's do it. I took a huge topic, much too big for me. I was not able to understand it. It took me another 15 years to understand it. But I finished my PhD after 1 year, 400 pages. Masses of literature, very self-confident, huge topics. Samuel Pufendorf, no problem, 3 pages. Hugo Grotius, no problem, 3 pages. I can understand all this. I dropped the names, oh my God. And then I got the chance, the publisher told me, oh, they did not sell very good, your PhD. What shall we do with the books? And I said, I buy them, all to me. I took all my money as a young scholar and bought all the books. So I'm sure nobody else can read them. So they are in some libraries, but the rest are behind me and behind the books here. You can't see them. I hid them in the second row. So it was very important for me to make all these mistakes. It's as a PhD, it's okay, I would say. But to me, to what I learned, my habilitation is totally different. Totally different. And I would say my habilitation is a good book. The PhD was a way to be able to write a good book in a few years. And I had to make all these mistakes. And so now I can laugh. There were some years when I was depressed thinking about my PhD.
I can say no reason. It's a good book. Some questions or comments more. Hannes, please.
Again, I have no question, but the name dropping, that is very, I'd say, not refreshing, but an interesting idea. We have seen it here in Estonia, in the whole Soviet Union. It was mandatory to begin with a quote of Karl Marx and Lenin. And I guess the tradition comes from the 19th century, and that has been upheld by Germans until now, apparently. But today, I don't know if the others will agree, but I don't think we have any of such authorities in Estonia, at least, which we all feel that we are forced to quote or rely on. So I would say that we have no such tradition, or maybe the pendulum has gone to the other end. We want to avoid such classics and quoting them and referring to them. So I think it's a bit of a smaller problem here in Estonia. I don't know if the others agree. So.
At the moment, for example, we have a debate in Germany about the queer movement. You will know all these things. And there are Judith Butler and all these thinkers from the US. But there's also Foucault as a foundation always. And there is a huge debate about the using of Foucault at the moment. Foucault is quoted all over, especially in left-wing scientific papers. And the one who read Foucault tried to solve him from being used for everyone who wants to say something about power or whatever. All these very general words, and then you quote Bourdieu, Foucault, Judith Butler. They are all used in a not very scientific way. So if this is better in your country, congratulations. We have huge problems with this name dropping at the moment. Derrida is also something nobody reads him, but everyone quotes him in Germany.
Easy, please.
If I may comment on this reading and name dropping, I think that this is always quite a problem for PhD students, that they feel that they have to name names, actually also for students in other levels as well, but they are not reading. They are not reading also the chapter they quote, but it's quite usual just to quote on the basis of someone else's work without really reading the original work. So this, and in that way, the traditions arise that there are always the same references or citations made, but not actually understood the significance or the idea of the original author and behind the theme. So if you are reading a work, one thing you should always do is to read yourself the one you are referring to.
Very important. This is rule number 18. Thank you. In Germany, one example, for 100 years, in all German books, there was a quotation from about private law, all these primary chapters, private law, student books, there was quoted Otto von Gierke, and a quotation from him about social oil that has to drop into the private law. Yeah. In reality, Gierke said socialist oil, but this was lost someone because no one never read the original text. Always somebody found it somewhere else and they took it from someone else and nobody found out that this is a wrong quotation. So I think there's a kind of industry in Germany which does nothing else than proving that you quoted wrongly. So I think it's very important to read the original. Yes.
Thank you. Lisa, please. You have raised your hand already some time ago.
I finally figured out how to raise hands in Zoom. So I'm Lisa. I'm doing my PhD in law, and I wanted to thank Hans-Peter for the presentation, because even though I'm not writing a monograph, some of the tips were really useful for my PhD journey as well. I have a question, more of a fundamental question that I think every PhD student grapples with, and you one of the messages that you put forth is write, and don't write this big overviews of literature where you try to explain everything. But how do you, and I don't know if you faced this during your PhD journey as well, but how do you as a PhD student grapple with the imposter syndrome, where you feel like what you're doing is not good enough and then you tend to over explain things? Thanks.
This is a very difficult question because self-confidence can be hybris, as it was to me as a young man, and it can be missing. So I think this is the main work of the professor you work with. So if I have my PhD students and I read their texts, I think it's my work to tell them, you don't need to make it too simple there. It's good what you write. Be self-confident. This is most important. At the beginning, I can absolutely understand that many read all these famous books and they are not very self-confident. This is very normal, I would say. So this is something the professor has to help you with, I would say. And not to help you, to help the one who has this problem. Sorry.
Yes, the supervisors.
The supervisors, yes.
Have one part of salary for this work.
Merike had a question.
Oh, Merike, please say also some words about you.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah, I'm Merike Ristikivi, and I'm the Associate Professor of Legal History and Director of the PhD program in Faculty of Law. Coming back to the dissertations that we have nowadays, basically we have in law nowadays still monograph as the main way to put your thoughts and research to discuss. And then we have also nowadays the article-based dissertations. And I believe that in Germany, it's more that you can see the article-based research put together for the habilitation, not so much for the PhD. Then it's not only the articles that the students need to write, but also this compendium or the umbrella article. Mm-hmm. And this seems to me that it's also developing kind of a new genre. It's like a mini monograph sometimes. And this is also quite difficult to put together all these different articles that you have published. That how this compendium should be. It's more expected to have the monograph structure, and so this is something. is it debated also in Germany? What should be there? So at least here it is really developing a lot of this kind of questions that how long should it be? How much you should put there, the names and the theories. So exactly the questions that we discussed here earlier.
I think it's all a question about the difference between legal science and natural sciences. We have tried all these systems also in Germany. We had these working groups at the Max Planck Institute, for example. One upcoming professor writes his habilitation with 6 PhD students who work on parts of this topic, and then he writes the compendium, the big book about this. And then they said, we did this once or twice. It's not very good because the PhD students say he stole our results. And the professors say, this is not a habilitation project because it's not his work, it's the work of the others. So group working, I think, does not function in law. Then we have also in Germany the discussion, do we need a book? Should we take papers? The problem is if you only have 2 or 3 very important journals and all your life is to be part of Nature, and you publish your paper in Nature and every say, okay, this makes so many, you have so-and-so points for this. In Germany, we don't have a journal system like this, and it did not work yet. We do not have, we have some peer-reviewed journals, but we do not have a journal ranking. I think it's very dangerous to have a journal ranking. So what we have is, we have thousands and thousands of papers. And we do not have any chance to differentiate between a good paper or bad paper, except reading it. So that means if we had the problem at the moment to find out there were five persons want to become professor in Cologne, and they send us the publication list, and we have huge problems to differentiate which is a good paper and which is a bad paper. And they all write papers all day long. So most of them have written more than 100 papers. So what shall we do? What can we do? If you have a monograph, there's a review of a monograph. Nobody reviews paper in law, at least in Germany. So there are reviews, and you can say, okay, we have these 2 or 3 reviews. Oh, nobody reviewed it. Not a good sign. So if you have a monograph, you have a system of quality, which still works in Germany. We have very critical reviews. We had very critical reviews in the last years, very, very critical. So this still works. So if we say, let's quit the books and take papers, except, then we have to find a system to evaluate these papers, and this is not there in Germany at the moment. I'm even part of 2 peer-reviewed, so-called peer-reviewed papers. If you're part of such a system, you don't believe in it. So Hannes.
Yes, I think in Estonia, lawyers are the dinosaurs in science, writing monographs. I don't know if I can, do you mind if I share my screen to show you a project I made in quantitative research. And do you see the color bars, gray and yellow?
Yes.
The gray the gray are articles, the dissertations from 2016 to 2020 that have been defended in Tartu University as in the form of articles. It is sociology, psychology, politology, pedagogics, law, and communication, and then economy. You see that in social sciences, and I'm not speaking of medicine and exact sciences. I think they all, mostly they do not monographs, but articles. Only the lawyers, we produce more monographs or defend more monographs. When we look at the humanitarian, there is a bit more fields. Then history is about half and half, theology about half and half. But for instance, archaeology, ethnology, external philology, general linguistics, they also tend to write articles rather than monographs. So this is a trend. The conclusion I made based on this really short project in another discipline was that nowadays PhD has become, how to say, it's devaluated. You should put less labor into it. You should rather team up with colleagues and write articles in a research group and get your PhD, and then continue your career, your academic career. That's my take from the research. Just a
that's a very
fun fact.
Interesting. That was very interesting, and I think it may be similar in Germany. But if you talk to somebody, I'm working in the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. This is the foundation where most of scientific projects are founded by the German government, and they express clearly that this system is not a very good, transparent, and fair system. But there is one reason why this system can't be quitted. And I think the reason is the politicians want numbers. They want to count.
Yeah.
And the social sciences made this number system, whether it's good or bad. You can say he has 250 and he only has 180. So 250 is better. So, and everyone who works in the system says it's ridiculous. It's not fair, it's not transparent, it's not really a quality system, but and they want it. And so then they ask us lawyers, they ask us, okay, what can you give us instead? We say, okay, we read the books, and then we tell you he's good, he's not so good, and we give you some reasons for it, but we can't give you numbers. We can't quantify this. It's a qualitative question. And this is, I think, the politicians, they want to say whether you, as university, you get money, as a professor, you got prolonged in your position, and they want to decide it by something which seems to be true. And the number seems to be true, and the other thing seems to be opinions, not, yeah.
Well, yeah, in a way, you have a dictate of the natural sciences. And I guess teachers here, they can tell more about this, but it is true. We have scientometria, I think it is called. It's gone to extreme. Everything is measured by number of publications and quotations and things, and it says half truth about the content, and you should rather look at the quality as well. And but unfortunately, I believe lawyers have remained a minority also within the university, at least here in Tartu.
There's also something which makes it very problematic. It's that law still is quite a national business. So many of the papers will write about Estonian law. So if you need peers, everyone knows everyone. So it's a ridiculous system to say we make him anonymous and give the paper to his best colleague, and he will, after 2 sentences, he will know who you are. So it doesn't work at all. It doesn't. It's Germans also. I mean, there's very small fields, and there are only 5 who know the topic. So it's ridiculous to say an anonymous, double-blind peer review. It's ridiculous. It does not work at all. Everyone knows that, but the politicians, they would love it.
I'm sorry, I was not in the room. And I asked Merike to take over the moderation, because I'm going working so often, I'm not sure I can do my work here. But at the moment I'm here, and we can continue with the discussion. If we have not only lawyers or legal historians here, it would be interesting to hear what are thinking the people from other disciplines.
And I was also wondering that if we have anybody here who is writing a monograph, that's interesting also.
Kerli, please. I'm very happy to see you here.
Yes, hello. First, thank you for an extremely interesting and inspiring lecture. It was really, really really amazing. Like hit so many nails. So I've also done I am writing a monograph on legal history, of medieval Livonia. So I have some background in law, but mostly I work with historical sources. So for me, all kind of programs like Citavi or Zotero are completely out of the question, because they just would not work with my sources. Because if you have like anything unpublished, any unpublished manuscripts, any kind of like different sources, then these systems won't work. So I've done the whole drill. Like I worked through the whole secondary literature. So anything from like Walton to Viaker to Watson, I think I know everything that there is to know about legal transplants. I think it took me about 2 years or so, but finally, yeah, I'm there. I built my own theory, so I'm very confident that I actually do know what I want to do, how I'm doing it, and so on. And I also love Gadamer. I think I was in love with him at some part of my life. But I have my question would be, how can I embrace the garbage bin? Because right now I have this wonderful structure. I have about, I think it's between 400 or 600, it depends how you count, of text. And I think it's about, I couldn't check from my computer, but I think it's between 4,000 and 5,000 sources that I'm quoting. So I really need to drop something because it's getting so big. But I also have this, this imposter syndrome, because if you're just starting out, it actually is very hard to think that, okay, I'm a specialist, I'm writing to other specialists and so on. So yeah, there was a question somewhere, but basically it was about how do I actually like make the cut of all these sources and all this literature. Because it really is, it has always been a problem for me. I remember my master's thesis was 170 pages, I think. And my supervisor actually cut, it was 300, but yeah, we finally settled on half. So I have this, I overwrite, and yeah, and I talk too much.
The garbage bin is a very psychological problem we all have. I think the first thing should be that you say, or that you say honestly to yourself, my book gets worse if I quote all them. So if I want to write a good book, I will not achieve it by quoting them. And the second thing is, what I do is I start a second book, and the second book, which I have parallel, I call it Reste. That's the rest. And when I throw it out, I do not quit it, do it to the bin. I put it in the second book. And the second book is the rest. So I don't know yet whether I take it in or not. So first I write the book with the things I really need. And the rest I could perhaps use. What I could perhaps use is in the second book. And then at the end, I go to the second book and I say, okay, what could be very interesting. Now, let's say I take perhaps 5% back or 10%. But at the beginning, I write the book as a skeleton. So just what is very important, what has to be written down, what has to be quoted. And this is the first main book. And then I said, perhaps I take this in, perhaps I decide, but it's not so that I at the beginning I have to throw it away. I make it, I simply say, perhaps I throw it away. And in the end, it's usually so when the paper is good, I just delete the second book. But psychologically, I have the same problem. I know one paper which I worked really long. This paper was 18 pages. I worked on it 6 months. And the second paper, the Reste paper, was 120 pages. So I have a lot more found than I used. And perhaps I can use it somewhere, whatever. We'll see. So perhaps this could be a trick, not to throw it away, just to decide this is very important and the rest could be interesting, like this.
Thank you very much.
I would say it's very easy to use this rest after the finishing of PhD thesis. And so I had a large file with this rest. It was bigger than my PhD book. But I used this large file in 3 years after the defense of my thesis in articles, and it's very important, especially in Estonia, because the Germans doesn't have this duty to publish piece by piece, but we have in our academic system this duty to publish and publish and publish every in every 5 years. You should publish at least 9 articles for international audience, and so and you can use your rest very quickly after the finishing of thesis. In that sense, they should not go in the bin. They are soon in the science, in the audience, but not in this book. So I think we are very well in time. Hans-Peter, if you want to say something for the last word, you have the possibility.
Thank you very much.
I'm very happy you investigated the time, and it was a very good lecture.
Thank you very much that you listened to this. I have the same problem that you have. If you write monographs, you're alone. And if you write a paper, usually you can talk to somebody. It's not so difficult. But writing a monograph is a huge thing, very complicated. I know when I, to my wife, when I tried to explain my habilitation project to my wife, this was a difficult afternoon. But I try to do this, just to tell her what I do, that I'm not only away all the time because I do something else. I'm away all the time because I have these strange ideas about these strange humans in former times. And so I'm very grateful that you listened to me, leaving me not so alone as an author as you may also be. We're all alone as authors, so we should talk about this. Thank you very much to listen to me.
Thank you, and thank the audience. It was an interesting discussion, and I'm happy we had this meeting today. In 1 hour, we will have our doctoral seminar, and together with Hans-Peter, but all the people who are now going to the wonderful spring in outside. Have a nice weekend and a nice day for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.